The Hittites were the mighty architects of Anatolia's ancient landscape, forging empires and shaping civilizations. Theirs was a world of grandeur and discovery, where myth and monument intertwined. Let us uncover the secrets of this enigmatic people and unleash the thunder of their forgotten legacy. In the realm of ancient Anatolia, where the sun rises over the rolling hills and vast plains, a land of mystery and intrigue beckoned. It was here, in the heart of modern-day Turkey, that the Hittites would arise, forging a kingdom that would rival the great powers of Egypt and Mesopotamia. As we delve into the dawn of Hittite history, we find ourselves in the midst of the 3rd millennium BCE, an era marked by the rise of complex societies and the development of writing. The region was then inhabited by various Anatolian peoples, including the Hatti, a non-Indo-European speaking population that would eventually be absorbed into the Hittite Empire. The landscape itself was dotted with small city-states, each with its own distinct culture and traditions. One such city-state was Hattusa, situated in the valley of the Buyukaya River, which would eventually become the capital of the Hittite kingdom. Archaeological excavations have revealed that Hattusa was already an important urban center during the 3rd millennium BCE, with a population engaged in agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship. The city's strategic location, nestled between the rugged hills of central Anatolia, provided a natural defensive position, making it an attractive site for the eventual rise of a powerful kingdom. As we explore the early history of the Hittites, we must turn to the written records of their neighbors, the Akkadians and the Egyptians, who left behind accounts of their interactions with these enigmatic people. The earliest known references to the Hittites can be found in the archives of the Hittite Empire, which flourished in Mesopotamia during the 24th century BCE. These records speak of a people called the Hatti, who were known for their military prowess and their skill in metalworking. One of the most significant figures from this period is King Pithana of Kusara, a Hittite ruler who would play a crucial role in shaping the destiny of his people. Although little is known about Pithana's life, it is believed that he was one of the first Hittite kings to unify the various city-states of Anatolia under a single rule. His reign, which likely occurred during the 18th century BCE, marked the beginning of a new era in Hittite history, one that would be characterized by expansion, conquest, and the development of a complex system of governance. As King Pithana's reign drew to a close, his son, Anita, would succeed him, further expanding the Hittite kingdom through a series of military campaigns. One of the most notable conquests during Anita's reign was the capture of the city of Hattusa, which would eventually become the capital of the Hittite Empire. The strategic location of Hattusa, nestled between the rugged hills of central Anatolia, made it an ideal site for the Hittites to establish a strong and centralized power base. Anita's military prowess was not limited to the conquest of Hattusa. He also launched campaigns against neighboring city-states, including Podushanda and Salatiwara. These military victories allowed the Hittites to expand their territory and establish themselves as a major force in Anatolia. The Hittite kingdom during this period was still in its formative stages, but Anita's conquests laid the foundation for the eventual rise of a powerful and complex state. One of the most significant archaeological discoveries related to this period is the finding of the Anita text, a cuneiform inscription that provides valuable insights into the early history of the Hittites. The text, which was discovered at the site of Queltepe, describes Anita's conquests and his relationship with other city-states in Anatolia. The Anita text is one of the earliest known written records of the Hittites and offers a unique glimpse into the politics and culture of this enigmatic people. As the Hittite kingdom continued to expand, it began to attract the attention of neighboring powers, including the Egyptians and the Mitanni. The Mitanni, in particular, would play an important role in Hittite history, as they would eventually become one of the Hittites' most powerful enemies. The Mitanni were a Hurrian-speaking people who inhabited the region of northern Mesopotamia and had established a powerful kingdom that rivaled that of the Egyptians. The Hittites' relationship with the Mitanni was complex and often contentious, with periods of both cooperation and conflict. One of the earliest recorded interactions between the Hittites and the Mitanni was during the reign of King Hattusili I, who would succeed Anita as king of the Hittites. Hattusili I launched a series of military campaigns against the Mitanni, which resulted in the conquest of several key cities, including Alalak and Yamhad. The reign of Hattusili I marked a significant turning point in Hittite history, as it saw the establishment of a powerful and centralized state that would eventually rival the great powers of Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Hittites' military prowess, combined with their strategic location at the crossroads of Asia Minor, made them a major force to be reckoned with in the ancient Near East. As the Hittite kingdom continued to expand, it would become embroiled in a complex web of alliances and rivalries that would shape the course of ancient history. The city of Hattusa, which had been conquered by Anita, became an important center of Hittite power and culture during the reign of Hattusili I. The city was strategically located at the confluence of several key trade routes, making it an ideal site for the exchange of goods and ideas. Archaeological excavations at Hattusa have uncovered a wealth of artifacts and texts that provide valuable insights into Hittite culture and society. One of the most significant discoveries at Hattusa is the finding of the Hittite archives, a collection of cuneiform tablets that contain a wide range of texts, including diplomatic correspondence, economic records, and literary works. The Hittite archives offer a unique glimpse into the inner workings of the Hittite kingdom and provide valuable information about the politics, economy, and culture of this enigmatic people. As the Hittite kingdom continued to grow and expand, it would become increasingly complex and bureaucratic, with a sophisticated system of governance that included a powerful king, a network of administrators, and a robust system of laws. The Hittite system of governance was unique in the ancient Near East, as it combined elements of both monarchic and feudal systems. As the Hittite kingdom's system of governance continued to evolve, it became increasingly characterized by a complex interplay between the king, the nobility, and the bureaucracy. One of the key figures in this system was the king himself, who served as the supreme authority and ultimate decision-maker. The Hittite kings, such as Hattusili I and his successors, wielded significant power and influence, but they were also bound by a web of obligations and responsibilities to their nobles, priests, and other stakeholders. One of the most important institutions in the Hittite kingdom was the palace, which served as the seat of royal power and the center of administrative activity. The palace at Hattusa, which was built during the reign of Hattusili I, was a sprawling complex of buildings that included throne rooms, temples, storerooms, and living quarters for the royal family and their attendants. Archaeological excavations at Hattusa have uncovered a wealth of artifacts and texts that provide valuable insights into the daily life and operations of the palace, including diplomatic correspondence, economic records, and literary works. The Hittite kingdom's bureaucracy was also characterized by a sophisticated system of record-keeping and administration, which relied heavily on cuneiform writing and clay tablets. The Hittites used these tablets to record everything from trade agreements and treaties to tax receipts and judicial decisions, providing a rich source of information for historians and scholars today. One of the most significant collections of Hittite texts is the Deeds of Suppiluliuma, which chronicles the military campaigns and diplomatic achievements of King Suppiluliuma I, one of the most famous and influential Hittite kings. Suppiluliuma I, who ruled from circa 1344 to 1322 BCE, is widely regarded as one of the greatest Hittite kings, and his reign marked a major turning point in Hittite history. During his time on the throne, Suppiluliuma launched a series of successful military campaigns against the Mitanni and other neighboring kingdoms, expanding the Hittite Empire and establishing its dominance over much of Anatolia and northern Syria. The Deeds of Suppiluliuma provide a detailed account of these campaigns, including the king's victories at the battles of Kadesh and Amchi, as well as his diplomatic negotiations with other rulers, such as the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten. One of the most significant consequences of Suppiluliuma's military campaigns was the establishment of a network of vassal states and client kingdoms that owed allegiance to the Hittite throne. These vassal states, which included kingdoms such as Ugarit and Amurru, played a crucial role in maintaining the balance of power in the ancient Near East, and their relationships with the Hittites were often complex and multifaceted. The Hittites used a variety of mechanisms to control and influence their vassals, including diplomatic pressure, economic incentives, and military force, as well as strategic marriages and alliances between royal families. The reign of Suppiluliuma I also saw significant developments in Hittite culture and society, particularly in the areas of art, architecture, and religion. The Hittites were known for their distinctive artistic style, which combined elements of Anatolian, Mesopotamian, and Aegean traditions, and their artisans produced a wide range of artifacts, including sculptures, pottery, and jewelry. The Hittite pantheon was equally complex and diverse, featuring a multitude of gods and goddesses, each with their own distinct characteristics and roles. The most important Hittite deity was the storm god Teshub, who was revered as the king of the gods and the protector of the Hittite throne. As Suppiluliuma I's reign drew to a close, his son and successor, Mursili II, ascended to the throne around 1322 BCE. Mursili II faced numerous challenges, including ongoing conflicts with the Mitanni and the rising power of the Assyrians. Despite these difficulties, he proved to be a capable and effective ruler, launching successful military campaigns against the Arzawa kingdom in western Anatolia and maintaining the Hittite Empire's dominance over its vassal states. One of Mursili II's most significant achievements was his campaign against the kingdom of Milawanda, which had been a thorn in the side of the Hittites for many years. The Milawandans had been raiding Hittite territories and disrupting trade routes, prompting Mursili II to launch a decisive attack on their capital city. The Hittite army, led by Mursili II himself, besieged the city and eventually breached its walls, forcing the Milawandan king to surrender. The terms of the surrender were recorded in a treaty, which has survived to this day and provides valuable insights into the diplomatic and military protocols of the time. According to the treaty, the Milawandan king was required to swear an oath of loyalty to Mursili II and agree to pay tribute to the Hittite throne. The treaty also established clear boundaries between the two kingdoms and provided for the exchange of prisoners and the resolution of future disputes through diplomacy. Mursili II's military campaigns were not limited to Anatolia, however. He also launched a series of attacks against the Syrian kingdoms, which had been allied with the Mitanni. The Hittite army marched as far south as the kingdom of Amurru, which was strategically located on the coast of modern-day Lebanon. The Amurru kingdom was an important center of trade and commerce, controlling access to the Mediterranean Sea and the lucrative trade routes that connected the Near East to Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Hittite campaign against Amurru was led by Mursili II's brother, Hattusili, who would later go on to become one of the most famous Hittite kings in his own right. Hattusili's military expedition was successful, and he was able to secure a treaty with the Amurru king, establishing Hittite dominance over the region and securing access to the Mediterranean trade routes. As Mursili II's reign progressed, however, the Hittite Empire began to face new challenges from the rising power of the Assyrians. The Assyrian kingdom, which was centered in modern-day Iraq, had been expanding its territories for many years and was now beginning to pose a significant threat to Hittite dominance in the Near East. The Assyrians were known for their military prowess and their advanced administrative systems, which allowed them to mobilize large armies and govern vast territories with ease. The Hittites and Assyrians had long been rivals, but during Mursili II's reign, tensions between the two powers began to escalate. The Assyrian king, Adad-nirari I, launched a series of attacks against Hittite vassal states in Syria, prompting Mursili II to respond with force. The resulting conflict was one of the most significant in the history of the Near East, pitting two of the greatest powers of the ancient world against each other in a struggle for dominance. The war between the Hittites and Assyrians would have far-reaching consequences, shaping the course of history in the Near East for centuries to come. As the conflict unfolded, Mursili II found himself facing not only the military might of the Assyrians but also internal challenges within his own kingdom. The Hittite Empire was beginning to show signs of strain, with regional governors and vassal kings increasingly asserting their independence and challenging the authority of the central government. As the war between the Hittites and Assyrians intensified, Mursili II found himself facing increasing pressure from his own nobles and vassal kings, who were growing restless under the strain of constant warfare. The Hittite Empire's administrative systems, which had been established by his predecessors, were beginning to show signs of weakness, with regional governors and vassal kings asserting their independence and challenging the authority of the central government. One of the most significant challenges faced by Mursili II was the rise of the kingdom of Ahiawa, a powerful and mysterious state that had emerged in western Anatolia. The Ahiawans were a major power in the region, with a strong navy and a network of alliances with other kingdoms and city-states. They had been raiding Hittite territories and disrupting trade routes, prompting Mursili II to launch a series of military campaigns against them. The Hittite army, led by Mursili II himself, marched into western Anatolia and clashed with the Ahiawans in a series of bloody battles. The war was fierce and intense, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Despite being outnumbered, the Ahiawans proved to be formidable opponents, using their naval superiority to launch surprise attacks on Hittite coastal cities and disrupt the empire's supply lines. As the war dragged on, Mursili II began to realize that he needed to adapt his military strategy if he was to have any hope of defeating the Ahiawans. He turned to his brother, Hattusili, who had gained valuable experience fighting against the Amurru kingdom in Syria. Hattusili was appointed as the commander of the Hittite army, and he quickly set about implementing a new strategy that focused on using mobile warfare and surprise attacks to outmaneuver the Ahiawans. The new strategy proved to be highly effective, and the Hittites were able to gain the upper hand against the Ahiawans. The war finally came to an end with the signing of a treaty, which established a lasting peace between the two powers and recognized the Hittite Empire's dominance over western Anatolia. With the war against the Ahiawans finally over, Mursili II was able to turn his attention to the growing threat posed by the Assyrians. The Assyrian king, Adad-nirari I, had been expanding his territories rapidly and was now beginning to pose a significant threat to Hittite dominance in the Near East. Mursili II knew that he needed to act quickly to counter the Assyrian threat, and he began to make preparations for a major military campaign against the Assyrians. The war between the Hittites and Assyrians would be one of the most significant conflicts of the ancient Near East, with far-reaching consequences that would shape the course of history for centuries to come. The Hittite army, led by Mursili II and his brother Hattusili, marched into the heart of Assyrian territory, determined to crush the Assyrian king and shatter the Assyrian Empire. The Hittites used their chariots and infantry to devastating effect, while the Assyrians relied on their powerful cavalry and archers to try and break the Hittite lines. As the war raged on, Mursili II found himself facing a new challenge in the form of the Mitanni kingdom, which had been a long-time ally of the Hittites, but was now beginning to waver in its loyalty. The Mitanni king, Shatiwaza, had been negotiating with the Assyrians, and it seemed that he might be about to switch sides and join forces with the enemy. Mursili II knew that he needed to act quickly to prevent this from happening, and he sent a diplomatic mission to the Mitanni kingdom to try and persuade Shatiwaza to remain loyal to the Hittites. The diplomatic mission was led by Hattusili, who had gained a reputation as a skilled diplomat and strategist. He traveled to the Mitanni kingdom and met with Shatiwaza, using all of his charm and persuasive powers to try and win him over. The meeting was tense and dramatic, with both sides engaging in a delicate game of cat and mouse. In the end, Hattusili emerged victorious, securing a new treaty with the Mitanni kingdom that guaranteed their loyalty to the Hittites and prevented them from joining forces with the Assyrians. With the Mitanni kingdom secured, Mursili II was able to focus all of his attention on the war against the Assyrians. The conflict was reaching its climax, with both sides suffering heavy losses and neither able to gain a decisive advantage. It seemed that the war would drag on indefinitely, with no end in sight. But then, in a sudden and dramatic turn of events, the tide of the war began to shift in favor of the Hittites. The Assyrian king, Adad-nirari I, died suddenly, and his successor, Shalmaneser I, proved to be less effective as a military leader. The Hittites took advantage of the Assyrian weakness, launching a series of bold and decisive attacks that pushed the Assyrians back on all fronts. The war was finally beginning to turn in their favor, and it seemed that victory was within their grasp. But just as the Hittites were about to emerge triumphant, disaster struck. Mursili II fell ill, and his health began to decline rapidly. The Hittite army was plunged into chaos, with no clear leader to take command and continue the fight against the Assyrians. As Mursili II's health declined, his brother Hattusili took on a more prominent role in leading the Hittite army, ensuring that the momentum gained against the Assyrians was not lost. The Hittite king's illness had created a power vacuum, and it was essential to maintain stability and continuity in the leadership to prevent the Assyrians from capitalizing on the situation. Hattusili, with his experience as a diplomat and strategist, was well equipped to handle the responsibilities of commanding the army and navigating the complex web of alliances and rivalries in the ancient Near East. Meanwhile, the Assyrian king Shalmaneser I, still reeling from the sudden death of his predecessor Adad-nirari I, struggled to assert his authority and regain the initiative against the Hittites. The Assyrian army, though still powerful, had suffered significant losses in the recent battles, and morale was beginning to sag. Shalmaneser I knew that he needed to act quickly to restore the confidence of his troops and prevent the Hittites from gaining a decisive advantage. In an effort to bolster his position, Shalmaneser I launched a series of campaigns against the neighboring kingdoms of Mitanni and Hanagalbat, hoping to secure vital trade routes and resources, as well as demonstrate his military prowess to the Hittites. However, these campaigns ultimately proved to be costly distractions, draining Assyrian resources and manpower at a critical juncture in the war. As the conflict between the Hittites and Assyrians continued to simmer, other powers in the region began to take notice of the shifting balance of power. The Egyptian pharaoh Seti I, who had long been watching the developments in the Near East with great interest, saw an opportunity to expand his own empire's influence in the region. He began to forge alliances with various kingdoms and city-states, seeking to create a counterbalance to the power of the Hittites and Assyrians. In the midst of this complex and dynamic geopolitical landscape, Mursili II's health continued to deteriorate, and it became increasingly clear that his reign was drawing to a close. The Hittite king's eventual successor, Muwatalli II, would face significant challenges in navigating the treacherous waters of ancient Near Eastern politics. As the Hittite Empire struggled to maintain its position against the rising tide of Assyrian power and the expanding influence of Egypt. As Mursili II's life slipped away, the Hittite court was filled with anxiety and uncertainty as various factions and interest groups maneuvered for position and influence in the impending succession crisis. The fate of the Hittite Empire hung in the balance, and it remained to be seen whether Muwatalli II would be able to provide the strong and effective leadership needed to guide the kingdom through the turbulent times that lay ahead. The death of Mursili II marked the end of an era for the Hittites and the beginning of a new period of uncertainty and transition. The future of the Hittite Empire would depend on the ability of its leaders to adapt and evolve in response to these changing circumstances, and to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries that characterize the ancient Near East. The accession of Muwatalli II to the Hittite throne marked a significant turning point in the history of the kingdom, as he faced the daunting task of rebuilding and reconsolidating Hittite power in the face of growing Assyrian and Egyptian influence. The new king would need to draw upon all his skills and experience to navigate the treacherous waters of ancient Near Eastern politics and to ensure the continued survival and prosperity of the Hittite Empire. One of Muwatalli II's first challenges was to deal with the aftermath of the war against the Assyrians, which had left both sides weakened and vulnerable to external threats. The Hittite king knew that he needed to act quickly to restore his kingdom's military strength and rebuild its alliances, in order to counter the growing influence of Egypt and Assyria in the region. To achieve this goal, Muwatalli II launched a series of diplomatic initiatives, seeking to forge new alliances with neighboring kingdoms and city-states. He also invested heavily in the reconstruction and modernization of the Hittite army, recognizing that military strength would be essential in maintaining the kingdom's position in the face of growing external threats. As Muwatalli II worked to rebuild and reconsolidate Hittite power, he was aware that the kingdom faced significant challenges on multiple fronts. The Assyrians, though weakened, still posed a major threat to Hittite security, while the Egyptians were increasingly active in the region, seeking to expand their own influence and control. The Mitanni kingdom, which had long been a key ally of the Hittites, was also beginning to waver in its loyalty, creating uncertainty and instability on the kingdom's eastern border. In response to these challenges, Muwatalli II adopted a flexible and pragmatic approach to foreign policy, seeking to balance the competing interests and alliances that characterized the ancient Near East. He recognized that the Hittite kingdom could not afford to be isolationist or complacent, and that it needed to engage actively with its neighbors and rivals in order to maintain its position and secure its future. As Muwatalli II navigated the complex web of alliances and rivalries in the ancient Near East, he faced a significant challenge from the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II, who was seeking to expand Egypt's influence in the region. The two powers had a long history of conflict, and Muwatalli II knew that he needed to be cautious in his dealings with the Egyptians. In 1274 BCE, Ramses II launched a major campaign against the Hittites, seeking to capture the strategic city of Kadesh, which controlled the trade routes between Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Battle of Kadesh was one of the largest chariot battles ever fought, with thousands of warriors on both sides clashing in a frenzy of dust and blood. The Hittite army, led by Muwatalli II, was well-trained and well-equipped, but the Egyptians had the advantage of numbers and superior logistics. Despite being outnumbered, the Hittites fought valiantly, using their advanced chariot tactics to hold off the Egyptian advance. As the battle raged on, Muwatalli II realized that he needed to find a way to break the stalemate and gain the upper hand. He ordered his generals to launch a series of flanking maneuvers, seeking to outmaneuver the Egyptians and attack them from the sides. The plan worked, and the Hittites were able to gain a temporary advantage, pushing the Egyptians back and capturing several key positions. However, Ramses II was not one to give up easily, and he rallied his troops, launching a series of fierce counterattacks against the Hittite lines. The battle seesawed back and forth, with both sides suffering heavy losses. In the end, the outcome was inconclusive, with both armies withdrawing from the field exhausted and depleted. Despite the lack of a clear victor, the Battle of Kadesh marked a significant turning point in the history of the Hittites. Muwatalli II had proven himself to be a capable and courageous leader, able to hold his own against one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world. The battle also marked the beginning of a new era of diplomacy between the Hittites and Egyptians, as both sides realized that further conflict would only lead to mutual destruction. In the years following the Battle of Kadesh, Muwatalli II worked tirelessly to rebuild and strengthen his kingdom, seeking to consolidate his gains and secure his borders. He launched a series of military campaigns against the neighboring kingdoms, seeking to expand Hittite influence and control. He also invested heavily in the development of his capital city, Hattusa, building new temples, palaces, and public buildings. One of Muwatalli II's most significant achievements was the creation of a new system of governance, which allowed for greater decentralization and autonomy for the various regions of the kingdom. This helped to reduce tensions and improve relations between the central government and the outlying provinces, allowing the Hittites to present a more united front against their external enemies. As Muwatalli II's reign progressed, he became increasingly concerned with the threat posed by the Assyrians, who were beginning to expand their influence in the region. The Assyrians were a powerful and ruthless people, known for their military prowess and their ability to absorb and assimilate other cultures. Muwatalli II knew that if the Hittites were to survive, they would need to find a way to counter the Assyrian threat, either through diplomacy or force of arms. In 1267 BCE, Muwatalli II launched a major campaign against the Assyrians, seeking to drive them back and secure the Hittite borders. The campaign was successful, and the Hittites were able to inflict significant losses on the Assyrians, forcing them to withdraw from the region. However, the victory was short-lived, as the Assyrians soon regrouped and launched a series of counterattacks against the Hittites. The conflict between the Hittites and Assyrians would continue for many years, with both sides suffering heavy losses and neither able to gain a decisive advantage. As the war dragged on, Muwatalli II became increasingly isolated and withdrawn, seeking to conserve his strength and bide his time until the right moment to strike. The fate of the Hittite kingdom hung in the balance, as the outcome of the conflict with the Assyrians would determine the course of history for generations to come. In the midst of this turmoil, Muwatalli II's brother, Hattusili III, emerged as a major player in Hittite politics. Hattusili was a cunning and ambitious man who had long been frustrated by his brother's dominance of the throne. He began to secretly build a power base of his own, seeking to undermine Muwatalli II's authority and eventually seize the throne for himself. As tensions between the two brothers continued to simmer, the Hittite kingdom was faced with an even greater challenge from outside its borders. The Mycenaean Greeks, who had long been allies of the Hittites, were beginning to expand their influence in the region, seeking to establish themselves as a major power in their own right. The Mycenaeans were a fierce and warlike people, known for their advanced military tactics and their love of conquest. In 1250 BCE, the Mycenaeans launched a major campaign against the Hittites, seeking to capture the strategic city of Troy, which controlled the entrance to the Dardanelles. The Hittites were caught off guard by the attack, and they were initially unable to respond effectively. However, as the war dragged on, Muwatalli II was able to rally his troops and launch a series of counterattacks against the Mycenaeans. As the war raged on, the Hittite kingdom was faced with an increasingly complex web of alliances and rivalries, as various powers sought to take advantage of the chaos and instability in the region. As the conflict between the Hittites and Mycenaeans continued, Muwatalli II's brother, Hattusili III, saw an opportunity to further his own ambitions. He began to secretly negotiate with the Mycenaeans, hoping to forge an alliance that would allow him to overthrow his brother and take the throne for himself. However, these negotiations were discovered by Muwatalli II, who was furious at his brother's treachery. The two brothers had a heated confrontation, but ultimately, Hattusili III was able to talk his way out of the situation, convincing Muwatalli II that he had been acting in the best interests of the kingdom. Despite this tension between the two brothers, the Hittite kingdom continued to face external threats. The Mycenaeans, led by King Agamemnon, launched a series of attacks on Hittite territories, hoping to weaken the kingdom and gain control of the strategic city of Troy. The Hittites, however, were able to hold their own against the Mycenaean attacks, thanks in large part to the military leadership of Muwatalli II. He was a skilled and experienced commander who had fought many battles against the Egyptians and other enemies of the kingdom. In 1240 BCE, the Hittites launched a counterattack against the Mycenaeans, hoping to drive them out of Anatolia once and for all. The campaign was led by Muwatalli II himself, who marched at the head of a large army of Hittite soldiers. The Mycenaeans, however, were not easily defeated, and they put up a fierce resistance against the Hittite attack. As the war dragged on, the Hittite kingdom began to face internal problems as well. The constant fighting had taken a toll on the kingdom's economy, and many of its people were struggling to survive. The nobles and priests of the kingdom also began to resent Muwatalli II's autocratic rule, and they started to plot against him. Hattusili III, who had been waiting for his chance to strike, saw an opportunity to exploit these divisions and further his own ambitions. In 1230 BCE, Hattusili III launched a coup against his brother, using his network of allies and supporters within the kingdom to overthrow Muwatalli II. The coup was successful, and Hattusili III took the throne for himself, becoming the new king of the Hittites. Muwatalli II, who had ruled the kingdom for many years, was forced into exile, and he would eventually die under mysterious circumstances. Hattusili III, now securely in power, set about trying to restore stability to the kingdom and end the war with the Mycenaeans. He launched a series of diplomatic initiatives, hoping to negotiate a peace treaty with the Mycenaean king, Agamemnon. However, these efforts were ultimately unsuccessful, and the war between the two powers would continue for many more years. Despite the challenges he faced, Hattusili III proved to be a shrewd and effective leader who was able to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries that existed in the ancient Near East. He formed an alliance with the Egyptians, who were also enemies of the Mycenaeans, and together they launched a series of attacks against the Mycenaean kingdom. The war would eventually come to an end, but not before it had taken a devastating toll on all of the parties involved. As the Hittite kingdom struggled to recover from the effects of the war, Hattusili III turned his attention to domestic affairs. He launched a series of reforms aimed at restoring the economy and improving the lives of the kingdom's people. He also invested heavily in the development of the kingdom's infrastructure, building new roads, temples, and public buildings. One of Hattusili III's most significant achievements was the creation of a new treaty with the Egyptians, which established a lasting peace between the two powers. The treaty, known as the Treaty of Kadesh, was signed in 1178 BCE and had marked an important milestone in the history of the ancient Near East. It was a testament to Hattusili III's skill as a diplomat and strategist, and it would have far-reaching consequences for the kingdom and its people. The Treaty of Kadesh also marked the beginning of a new era of cooperation between the Hittites and Egyptians, who would work together to counter the growing threat of the Assyrians. The Assyrians, led by their powerful king, Tiglath-Pileser I, were expanding their empire and threatening the stability of the entire region. The Hittites and Egyptians knew that they had to act quickly to stop them, or risk being overwhelmed by the Assyrian war machine. In 1160 BCE, the Hittites and Egyptians launched a joint campaign against the Assyrians, hoping to drive them back and secure their borders. The war between the three powers would continue for many more years, with all sides suffering heavy losses and none able to gain a decisive advantage. As the war dragged on, the Hittite kingdom began to face new challenges and threats. The Sea Peoples, a group of naval raiders from the eastern Mediterranean, were launching attacks on Hittite coastal cities and disrupting trade. The Hittites also faced challenges from other neighboring kingdoms who were taking advantage of their weakness to launch raids and attacks. Despite these challenges, Hattusili III remained determined to defend his kingdom and its people. He launched a series of campaigns against the Sea Peoples and other enemies, using his military skills and strategic genius to outmaneuver them. However, the kingdom was ultimately unable to withstand the combined pressure of its many enemies, and it would eventually collapse under the weight of these external threats. In 1150 BCE, the Hittite kingdom came to an end, as the capital city of Hattusa was sacked by the Sea Peoples. The kingdom's people were either killed or forced to flee, and its territories were divided up among its neighboring kingdoms. Hattusili III himself disappeared from the historical record, and it is not known what ultimately became of him. As the Hittite kingdom collapsed, its territories were indeed divided among its neighboring kingdoms, with the Neo-Hittite states emerging in southern Anatolia and northern Syria. These city-states, such as Meled, Tabal, and Kieh, would go on to play an important role in the region's politics and culture, although they would never regain the glory of the Hittite Empire. One of the most notable consequences of the Hittite collapse was the rise of the Assyrian Empire under Tiglath-Pileser I. The Assyrians, who had long been a thorn in the side of the Hittites, now expanded their territories, conquering many of the Neo-Hittite states and incorporating them into their empire. The Assyrians also established trade relationships with the Phoenicians, who would go on to become major players in the Mediterranean economy. In the aftermath of the Hittite collapse, the city of Carchemish, which had been an important Hittite center, became a key location for the Neo-Hittite states. The city's rulers, such as Ura-Tarhunda, would go on to play a significant role in the region's politics, forming alliances with other city-states and interacting with the Assyrians and Phoenicians. As the centuries passed, the legacy of the Hittites continued to shape the culture and politics of the ancient Near East. The Hittite language, which had been written in cuneiform script, would eventually give way to the Luwian and Phrygian languages, although many Hittite words and phrases would be incorporated into these new languages. The Hittite system of government, which had been based on a complex network of vassal states and alliances, would also influence the development of later empires in the region. The Assyrians, for example, would adopt many of the Hittites' administrative practices, including their system of governors and provincial administration. In terms of material culture, the Hittites' legacy can be seen in the many artifacts that have been discovered by archaeologists, including pottery, sculpture, and metalwork. Many of these artifacts, such as the famous Hittite lions from the city of Malatya, demonstrate a high level of craftsmanship and artistic skill. As the ancient Near East continued to evolve and change, the memory of the Hittites would live on, influencing the development of later cultures and civilizations in the region. The Hittites' interactions with other powers, such as the Egyptians and Mycenaeans, had helped to shape the course of ancient history, and their legacy would continue to be felt for centuries to come. The last remnants of Hittite culture can be seen in the archaeological record of the 7th century BCE, when the Neo-Hittite states were finally absorbed into the Assyrian Empire. The city of Tarhunta, which had been an important Hittite center, was destroyed by the Assyrians, and its inhabitants were deported to other parts of the empire. The final inscription that mentions the Hittites is from the reign of the Assyrian king Esarhaddon, who ruled from 680 to 669 BCE. In this inscription, Esarhaddon boasts of his conquests in Anatolia and his destruction of the Neo-Hittite states. The inscription marks the end of the Hittite period and the beginning of a new era in the ancient Near East, one that would be dominated by the Assyrian Empire. The site of Hattusa, the former capital of the Hittite Empire, was eventually abandoned and left to ruin. However, its legacy lived on, and it would continue to influence the development of later cultures and civilizations in the region. The discovery of the Hittite capital by archaeologists in the 20th century CE would shed new light on the history and culture of this fascinating civilization and would help to cement its place in the annals of ancient history. Their complex system of government, rich cultural heritage, and epic struggles against rival powers have left an indelible mark on the fabric of human experience. The Hittite story is a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity, creativity, and perseverance, a reminder that even the greatest empires rise and fall, yet their impact lives on through the ages. As we close this chapter on the Hittites, we're left with a profound appreciation for the intricate tapestry of history, woven from the threads of triumph and tragedy, of grandeur and decline. Thank you for joining me throughout this historical journey. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.